Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Inspirate Business, the show that's here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. And as you can see, and those that have been following our shows, we have a brand new set with a new season underway post Ramadan. And we continue to bring to you some of the leading personalities in our community who are making an impact in their own right, in their own sphere of influence. We have one thing we haven't changed is our red hot couch we talk about from Aza Collective in Cromerville. And we have none other than a family member of mine. I must put that disclaimer. Somebody who is doing amazing work in the financial management space. A person that is, like I said, family. I think we share the same great grandparents. Welcome to the Inspirate Business Show, Khadija Dangor.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to your crew, and obviously assalamu alaikum to you and your listeners, your viewers and your crew. It's lovely to be here. A little daunting being here on your red hot couch, but thank you for having me.
Great. Look, it is daunting for me as well. I just said that I came in and the whole set is changed, and that's just how what we say. When you put yourself in an uncomfortable space is where you grow.
So one of my favorite quotes at the moment is that we cannot plan for specific scenarios, but we need a mindset which can manage uncertainty. So today, case in point, you have to have that mindset to manage uncertainty, and that's the way in which we grow. And I think that's so prevalent in our country today as well.
Yes. Now, you are at the moment with the Liberty Group, and you are an operations head on their trading and investment platform. And that's quite an accomplishment, being there, I think, there for the last couple of years.
About 7 years now.
Right,
yes.
but you've got a very rich and colorful history. I remember meeting you not so long ago, well, maybe about 10 years ago, I think now, in Abu Dhabi, and you were at that time with one of the banks in Abu Dhabi.
I was at the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, also in a trading, on the trading floor in a support function. Yes.
No, great. And so where did it all start? I think that's what we want to understand. We all see the person, and nobody double clicks, right? And then understands how did it all start? Where did you come from? Where did you grow up? So where did it all start?
So the story starts in Fordsburg, in a back cottage in Munt Road. And I think we all have stories, and thank you for allowing me to share mine. So it starts in a back cottage in Munt Road, and I think no story cannot start without my parents. There's just so much that they have done for me, and so much that they've taught me that I probably would take up the entire segment, so I won't even go there. But the story certainly starts there because they have taught me the value of honesty and the value of authenticity. And I think growing up in Fordsburg with humble beginnings and humble means, those were really the two lessons that I've taken away. But aside from that, I think growing up, if I reflect on my life, and coming on the show has given me that opportunity to reflect, I look back at all the characters that are in Fordsburg, and we were certainly blessed with some very inspirational people. Now, my story is probably very different in the sense that my role models are not models. They're not Hollywood stars. They're not politicians. Actually, there's nobody in the limelight that is my role model. My role models are all those unsung heroes that I've seen in my family, in my community, that I've seen on the streets of Fordsburg. And if we look back, there's so many of those characters. If you go back, there's Auntie Zora Isani in Munt Road, who heads up JIS. She taught us about empathy, about compassion, about giving back to communities. There's the auntie on the corner who used to get up and make samosas to educate her children. I mean, there's a lot to be said there. people like that teach you so much about work ethic, about sacrificing, about leveraging the skills you have, about taking a situation and not becoming a victim, but becoming a victor. And so there's so many of those stories that I can share that have shaped me and shaped the person I am today. My own grandmother, who taught me about courage, who taught me about strength. She lost her husband at a young age. She continued for herself, for her family, for her son. My uncle, again, losing a father at a young age, worked very hard. He taught me a lot about work ethic, hard work, starting at ground roots. Today he leads a leading organization in Africa. He runs a multi-million-dollar motorcar franchise within Africa. So there are so many of those stories that emanate from my family, my community. I mean, sure, there's more. I mean, if you'd like me to share, there's so much more.
And you come from quite a unique heritage, right? Talking about your family and coming and growing up in that that I would say a very special time. Fordsburg being that epicenter, and I know the family home on Mint Road was almost a halfway stop for those that used to go out to the Eastern Transvaal at the time, Mpumalanga today. You'd always come, and it was always a hustle and bustle of activity. So that family rearing must have been very important for you. Then you also have your mom's family, who are very prominent in Botswana, right? The Dadas in Botswana. So that combination of the Dangor and the Dada family must have really given you a lovely mix in terms of who you are today.
Absolutely. I think I've seen both sides of the coin. I've seen people come from very humble beginnings, and then I've seen people that have come from privilege as well. But I think the most important thing that I've learned from both sides is that you must have humanity in what you're doing and work ethic. I think that's such an important thing. That's so key to most people's success today. And I think if there's a message to go out today to some of the younger generation that we see and some of the people that I see within my industries, don't be afraid of hard work. They always say work hard, don't work hard, work smart, but you actually do need to do both. You need to work hard and you need to work smart. There's a lot said for having a very strong work ethic, for choosing to do more and choosing to be better. It's a mindset shift.
That's very, very powerful. There's this modern thinking with, especially in the personal development space. And, I having been an avid sort of practitioner in that space, that it's not, and it almost negates the hard work side. You just think it and the abundance just comes in. And yes, mindset is very, very, very important. And then you spoke about not being a victim, depending on whatever your circumstances are. But you can't fault, and there's been so many people that have sat on this couch. And the one thing that comes out so strongly, and here you're saying it again, is that old school values, our grandparents used to, that's how they built their empires in their own unique rights, is through that hard work, right? That hard graft.
Absolutely. If you just take most successful business people, we can look at a lot of C-suite individuals, but ask them where they started. Not everybody had things fall on their lap. If you look at the CEO of Google, look at where he started. So you can, I think it's very important not to forget that hard work. It's actually a phrase my dad uses. He says, if you go to the graveyard, you'll never see a tombstone that says killed by hard work.
Brilliant.
So hard work never killed anybody.
Yeah, it's so true.
But I think it's more than just hard work. I think there's a combination of hard work, but it's also a combination of your attitude. So to your point around, in industrial psychology and in organizational development, there's a lot around your mindset. And it's important to have the right mindset. We talk about this concept of a growth mindset, which is very important. But the combination of the two is formidable. So if you can have that growth mindset with that hard work ethic and you can combine the two, that's a formidable combination.
Yeah, no, I think what COVID has taught us, and I mean, we forget just a couple of years back, we were in this whole lockdown and the whole world came to a still. And that must have really affected the financial management industry and your work and how things have changed. So you've had to adapt. I guess your organizations have had to adapt. And we'll talk a lot about that, as we go ahead, and how we need to navigate through all these challenges, because let's be honest, there are a lot of challenges. We each go through our own. There's mental health issues, there's relationship issues, there's financial challenges, health issues, all of these, and they all come at the same time. And it's about how do we navigate through all of this. And you speak about, yes, crafting and hardworking, but also that mindset, which is so important. So we've come to the end of this segment. It's been, really moving fast with Khadija Dangor, who is, I say this again, we are family, so that's actually you can probably see the dynamics and pick up the energy. And we want to just get into her mindset, get into how she's gotten to where she is, and what are those keys that we can learn from in terms of being successful, especially in this corporate environment. Catch you after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate Business, where we have none other than Khadija Dangor, who has been inspiring us with some real pearls of wisdom, some old school values. You look at Khadija and you see this, what one may see as this modern girl, but what comes out very strongly for me, Khadija, is your those principles. Though you talk of hard work, those are principles that are time immemorial. Our great grandparents taught us this. Our grandparents taught us this. They would open their stores, and they would be on the floor, and they would be pushing every day, and then saving. You were talking about it at the break as well, about you in the financial management space, and you were saying about how the world today has become such big consumers, and our parents were not like that. It was more around creating value. Maybe you can share a little bit about that, and your experiences, in the financial management space.
So certainly, thank you. One of my experiences, and something that I experience, quite a lot today, especially with the younger generation, my own child, and so
How
on.
old is you got a son?
I've got a son, and
Yeah.
he's going to be 10 this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this at that right time where you're teaching him the right values?
We try. We try. Parenting is a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
We certainly do try. But I think one of the lessons that I learned, and funnily enough, I learned this lesson very heavily when I worked at Investec, from my Jewish colleagues. And the lesson I learned from my Jewish colleagues is that don't expect everything on a platter. Don't expect to be given a fancy 21st birthday, as an example. Don't expect to be given a fancy BMW if you pass matric or if you're going to university. In fact, what I learned from my Jewish colleagues was teach your children how to use money. Teach your children how to invest in money. Teach your children how to save. And I think for me, this is something that has certainly not come across strongly in our community. It's certainly an area where we could improve on. We used to do these sessions at work where we used to get people within the banking industry to teach us about investing and teach us about trading. And a lot of those educators told us that as part of the Jewish community, they would provide their children with those lessons at the age of 21. That was their birthday present at the age of 21, not the fanciest BMW. And so that stuck with me for quite a while. And I think it goes back to one of the books I've also read. I'm not sure if you've read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yes, Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes. Yeah. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad also talks about some of those principles. Is how do we teach our children to save? How do we teach our children to invest, to become financially independent? And I think for me, financial independence is such a key lesson that we need to teach our children. We need to teach our communities. We need to teach basically our community.
And interestingly, I mean, growing up, we had parents that came from quite humble backgrounds. And I mean, there it wasn't around consumerism. I mean,
No.
you growing up, you remember you were just to have bought or spoiled with a soccer boot, for example, was like a huge thing, right? Today, I guess we make the mistake because you feel that you want to just give to your children. So you think you're doing them justice. But you said such a powerful thing. You said at the age of 21, what they're doing is they're giving them the values. And so rather than giving them the BMW, because when you have those values of creating wealth and creating creating money, then what you're then doing is you can buy so many BMWs and employ so many people and become uh, uh, creators of value rather than dissipating value, rather than just
Absolutely.
consumers, right?
Absolutely. And I think, like I said, there's so much we could learn and there's so much we could do. And maybe we could do a show on this
Yes,
sometime.
yes, of course, of course, of course. And I mean, I think it's so required, especially for our youngsters today. I mean, you just see it the world over. And I mean, you bombarded, right? Let's be honest. You bombarded, you'd go into a mall and it's just about consumerism and they put on these icons, these personalities, and they're just bombarding you with like branding and associating, and some of prices that are just astronomical when you think of, just now recently, I mean, this whole concept of that prime launch of that prime drink, and you look at it and you look at the cost of that thing, and you see what were people paying, and actually willingly, people wanted to pay that 400 and 500 bucks for the thing when it's actually worth like 20 bucks.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said about consumerism and the way in which kind of we sucked in the media and social media, etc. But I think what's most important, and again, it goes back to some of those lessons that I've learned as a young child, is the lesson of authenticity, the lesson of being humble, the lesson of working hard, of saving. And I think some of those lessons I learned throughout my community within Fordsburg. Um, you know, life is stories. I always say, we learn so much about people through stories, through watching people. So, whilst a lot of my learning may have been through university and my education, actually, most of my learning comes through observational learning. Observing the people in our community, observing kind of the women that have struggled and have made something of themselves. That's where you take a lot of the lessons. And let me talk through some of those characters again. I touched on some of them in the first segment, but let's touch on more because there are so many.
And you must remember, this is at that height of Fordsburg.
Absolutely.
It was an absolute amazing place. I mean, around the corner was the movies, and people used to go to Majestic and Lyric.
Avalon.
And yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a fantastic place to grow up in. And I had some really fantastic role models. So I had an aunt of mine who was divorced in the 70s, big taboo. But I learned so much from her. She would get up every day, take a bus into town, and go into work, come back in the evening. But she taught me about holding your head up high despite adversity. She taught me about the importance of a woman being financially independent. Very much so in our community. Women were often very reliant on their husbands, not active in their husbands' businesses, but not in my family. In my family, it was quite different. In fact, the rhetoric in my family was very different. Here was my aunt who was working. There was my mum who was actually, when my dad started his motor car business, my mum was his driver. So, they couldn't afford a driver. My mum used to go with him, drive, and help him build the business. So in our community and in my family, in my sphere, in my world, women always played a very big role in business and in elevating business and inspirating business. And I take those lessons, and I take them till today. We had a Hasina on the corner. She was a young lady who lost her arm in a motor car accident. So she actually did not have an arm. But she came on to she became a formidable lawyer, one of the top lawyers in Johannesburg. And she was eventually admitted as a judge in the High Court. So we learn lessons from people like that despite your challenges, despite your adversity, despite your circumstances, you have to rise above. And I think the most important thing in that is tenacity. What sets us apart is grit and tenacity.
You speaking of this, and what comes to mind, and I think we have the example through our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite wisdom has given us this example for us to live. And here was the Prophet, and peace be upon him, and he, because of his authenticity, because of his honesty, integrity, a very prominent businesswoman finds him, uh, Khadija,
Khadija, my namesake.
right?
Yes.
And
I'm her namesake.
and look at that, right? And she was a successful businesswoman, and she needed somebody to help. And you're speaking about your mom and dad and a combination of how they worked to grow. I mean, a prominent business today. I mean, it's a brand, right? Dangor's car sales. Your dad's business, and I know your dad as well. I mean, he's very the old school principles that he got from his father, and I mean, your great grandparents were prominent in terms of building communities. So this is the other thing that's so important, and I think from an Islamic perspective, is that we talk about money and creating wealth, and we're all looking at bettering ourselves. But what our forefathers, and maybe we can speak a little bit about that as we come to the end of this year, is that it's become a world where it's all about us, the individual. You make your money, you better your life, and rightfully so, your family's life. But then it's the element of hoarding. And then you're hiding it in all these different financial instruments. And the Islamic economic system, yes, you do it. And I think our forefathers did that. And then it was about building communities so that you're uplifting the person next to you as well. And when you do that, they become prominent. And then they give back. And that's how you build. And I think that is where I think we have lost it. And that's where you get in this big gap between those that have and those that haven't. And maybe let's talk a little bit about that, after the break. So we've come again to the end of the segment where we're talking money, we're talking mindset, we're talking life, we're talking good old school principles, authenticity, grit, tenacity, hard work, and of course, a very, very strong mindset. I mean, Islamically, again, we taught that we need to always have hope no matter what our challenges are. Let's explore these and more with none other than Khadija Dangor after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate Business, where we're here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. And we have on our red hot couch, sponsored by Aza Collective in Kramerville, Khadija Dangor, somebody who is been speaking to us about issues around role models that have impacted her life. And it's not about these leading personalities, these models and famous people. It's just the ordinary people that surrounded her environment where she grew up in the hustle and bustle of Fordsburg, an epicenter, which still is today. And when you go to Fordsburg today, and I think this is something that we experienced in our generation, but you look at the first generation Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis that have come, Fordsburg still remains this place of hope, this place of, I mean, you spoke of people that have come out of there that have been disabled, that have become very prominent, with, again, a woman, like you said, your aunt that was divorced and yet went to work and, upped her life. And you think of people that have come from their own environments, whatever challenges they've come from, in their mainland areas where they've come from, their home countries, and have come to Fordsburg, and it's here that they're building businesses and growing and bettering themselves.
Yeah, we could almost rebrand it as the halfway house for hope.
Yeah, brilliant, isn't that?
We could actually rebrand it.
That is
and
true.
I think it still remains that today.
And your home, your ancestral, your family home was that halfway house.
Absolutely, it definitely was. I mean, my parents and my grandparents received a lot of people coming in from various different towns, and they would stop there. My grandmother, she passed away in her late 80s, but she wouldn't leave Fordsburg. She loved that area.
And I remember her to be a very strong woman. Just a very infectious personality, right?
She was. We actually, a lot of people knew her, Auntie Fees, as everybody fondly referred to her as, and her house was always open to anybody and everybody, and she welcomed it. And maybe that's something that we've lost today. I mean, I think you spoke about the giving and the communities and the building and the uplifting. So I think there is an element of that which we have certainly lost as a community. You know, I think our homes were a lot more open to people in the past. I think we are slightly closed off now. Where I do differ from you in thought is that I think we are quite blessed in the sense that our Islam teaches us about giving, you know, our 5 pillars, you know, zakat, give 2.5%. That is ingrained in us. It's ingrained in our DNA. And I've worked in various organizations, you know, I've worked in London, I've worked in Paris, I've worked in Abu Dhabi, I've worked, you know, in a few countries across the globe, and I've dealt with a lot of diverse people. And I have to tell you that we should be so proud and so blessed that we have this concept of giving in our DNA, because not everybody has that concept of giving. There are many communities that are very closed to the idea of giving. And so whilst I agree in the sense that maybe our forefathers did more than us and, you know, built more than us, and there's that element that we could probably rekindle, but the fact that we have it ingrained in our DNA, this concept of giving, this concept of uplifting, this concept of enabling others through charity, through good work, through dawah, that is something that we should be so incredibly grateful for.
That's so powerful, you know. We tend to look at all our challenges and don't appreciate what we have. And I mean, you've just reminded me that, I mean, we sit in these studios in Ramadan and we have what, like maybe 20 organizations, maybe even more, that come here. And what is all their mission about? It's just about giving. It's about uplifting destitute people in various forms, giving dawah, right? And it's because what? Giving them that light to uplift themselves. And we're doing amazing work because of that Islamic ethos you speak about.
Absolutely. And I think as Muslims, we should be so proud of the work that we are doing. You know, we have so many wonderful organizations that are doing good work. And we talk about the youth, and we spoke about them earlier, and the fact that they, you know, we need to teach them about budgeting and teach them about saving. But I think we also need to reflect on the positives that we see. And, you know, I do some volunteer work. I've done some with Gift of the Givers. I've done some with Islamic Relief. And you see the youngsters coming out in Ramadan, packing the hampers, going out and distributing amongst the communities. And that should also be praised. You know, we should not just look at the things that we don't do well. Let's celebrate the things that we actually do well.
Okay, I just want to shift a bit of gears. I mean, you've traveled a lot around the world, right? I mean, you know, recently you were, there's a very interesting story, by the way. I just want to share the story. Khadija is traveling and she gets onto a taxi. Well, you can share the story.
Yeah, so, I mean, for your viewers, this is a very famous individual. I land in Chicago and I get picked up from the airport. And my surname is recognized by the transfer, the guy that's running the transfer service. And he says, "Are you by any chance from Gujarat? And do you know the famous Mr. Dinda?"
I think it's the Facebook connection, and he's from the same ancestral home, right?
Absolutely.
He's from Colvard
So
in India, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
and so that's how I got onto the show. So serendipity.
Serendipity. So it helps to be a Colvard, right? Anyway, but your travels has really opened your mind. I mean, that experience in the Middle East, in the financial sector in the Middle East, you know, working for one of the banks, right, in
National
Abu Dhabi.
Bank of Abu Dhabi at the time, yeah.
What was that like? I mean, there's a lot of people that are now looking to, you know, with all the challenges in South Africa, looking to seek greener pastures, in inverted commas there. So maybe just share a little bit about that.
So, you know, there were a couple of places that I've worked, not just Abu Dhabi. So I started off, I think the first international stint I did was actually in London. And here I was kind of 24, 25, going off to kind of, you know, bank station in London at JP Morgan. You know, really I was quite green behind the ears. And I was very anxious and I was very nervous and maybe very much so, very intimidated. You know, I thought, oh, I'm going to be with all these very fancy British bankers. And I think the lesson that came out of that is that as South Africans, as a nation, we don't give ourselves enough credit. Because we're actually incredibly smart people. We deal with challenges which most people don't have to deal with on a daily basis, and we still do it with a smile, we do it with warmth, we do it with empathy. Our banking sector is probably one of the most advanced in the world. And having spent the time in London and then also in Paris, because I did a stint with JP Morgan in Paris, you realize that we have an incredible banking sector here, probably world-class banking sector, and incredibly talented people, and that we should not feel intimidated by the likes of British or American bankers, because we are definitely on par, if not better, than some of them when it comes to our skills, our mindsets. And we have this ability to balance the technical skills, but also empathy, which I think is really important.
And also with that street smart savviness, right?
Absolutely.
I think that South Africans have got this creativity because of, I guess, all these challenges that we face. Right?
Absolutely.
Coming from apartheid and then the normal socioeconomic challenges that we face.
Absolutely. And I think this is it. Our ability to navigate change is so incredible. And our ability to navigate uncertainty is so incredible. Things are not easy for us as South Africans. I mean, take us where we are today. We're battling load shedding. Eskom has its challenges. Transnet has its challenges. Overall, most industries have their challenges. Look at the rand. I mean, we've scored a lot of own goals as a country, as SA Inc. We've scored a lot of own goals. We were recently grey listed by FATF, by the Financial Intelligence Task Force. So we've scored a lot of own goals. But despite that, in spite of that, and despite of that, we still rise above. And I think that's what's incredible. And if there's a lesson that I've learned through my challenges, it is that despite and in spite of our situation, we've risen above as individuals.
That word comes to mind that you mentioned earlier, tenacity.
Absolutely.
We've got that as a nation. And you think of it not just as those in the corporate world, but you think of the young, not the young, but the woman out there who's hustling on that street corner with her table.
Absolutely.
What they call the mama hawker.
Yes.
Just think of what she goes through. Does she not have the tenacity, that hard work? She has to have that mindset every day that I'm going to go out and feed for my family. And there are some amazing stories like that have women like that have come out, have empowered their children to become now lawyers and professionals, and they've changed their trajectory of their life. And with all the challenges, you spoke about that in that first segment as well. They didn't play the victim, but allowed their circumstances, or did not allow their circumstances to get them down, but worked around it. And those are maybe the key credentials or unique traits of our society, of what makes us uniquely South African. And I think if we take this and stop scoring own goals, let's now put the best team in there, and let's start being the Ronaldos and the Messis now, right?
Absolutely. I think it's about time.
We deserve it, right?
We do. We absolutely do, because this is an incredible country. We have, incredible people, incredible landscapes, incredible weather, incredible food. So we need to stop scoring those own goals.
Okay, we've come to the end of the segment where we're saying we need to stop scoring goals as a country. So true. We can talk on that for many a show, and maybe we should also as to what makes us this uniquely South African, and how do we harness, they say in business terms, you do the SWOT analysis.
Yes.
Let's look at our strengths. And I mean, you reminded me a lot, even from an Islamic perspective, of how we don't cherish our strengths, our innate gifts that Allah has given us, and then use that, appreciate. I think that element that you brought, you said, do we make shukr enough for what we have? Yes, it's easy to complain, and we should complain. I mean, it's no doubt that you can't just turn a blind eye, but what are we doing, and how do we harness this for our kids? I mean, you have a 10-year-old, and they are the generations that can take us forward. I want to talk a little bit, which I don't think we got to after the break, around Because a lot of people want to, like, maybe say you lived in Abu Dhabi, and a lot of people are looking at the Middle East. And let's look at that. What are the pros? What are the cons? And also, where do you see yourself, in the next 5 years, the future? Let's explore that in that last segment after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate Business, where we've already come to the last segment of this very inspiring show. As we say, we like to inspire, empower, and enlighten, and I believe we have been inspired, empowered, and enlightened by real pearls of wisdom from Khadija Dangor. As I mentioned, I can't stop saying that she's family. And we share the same great grandparents, somewhere there, I think. But comes from what they term good stock, right? Good combination, old school values. Her great grandparents were very prominent in building communities and uplifting communities. I know her mom's family, very prominent in the Botswana community as well. And with this rich history, but also we're talking about how we can leave a legacy also for our children. I think we owe it to our children to leave, a world that when we leave, we can say that they've got the values that they can also traverse the uncertainty. But we also spoke about what makes us uniquely South African and the tenacity, that ability, and based on Khadija's experience internationally. You spoke about being in the UK and how strong our financial system is, our banking system, which again, a lot of people are talking about South Africa being a failed state. And maybe that's where you can come in. Do you see it as a failed state? I mean, you said we scoring a lot of own goals, admittedly, but is it a failed state?
Look, I don't want to really go into that. What I will say is we have our challenges. We certainly have our challenges. And I think what we need to do is look at ways to rise above those challenges. I'm not going to comment on whether we are a failed state or not, but we have been scoring a few own goals in the past, and we have challenges. But we also have people with a tremendous amount of grit, and that goes a long way. It certainly goes a long way.
Now, you spent a bit of time in the Middle East. I'd like to get a bit of an idea of living there, the experiences there. How was it for you? I mean, Islamic country, you in that financial sector. I mean, at the moment, the Middle East is like going all social media. It's become the epicenter of the world.
So I was incredibly fortunate to be recruited by what was then the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, but it's now called First Abu Dhabi Bank after a merger, whereby I was running a risk function on their trading floor. I've learned a lot of things there. I mean, I think working on that particular trading floor, we worked with so many diverse people. Much more diversity than I've actually experienced in South Africa. So we worked with people from the Philippines, from India, Bangladesh, America, Saudi, Jordan, Egypt. I worked with a number of different nationalities, and we learn and we draw experiences from all of these. So that was an incredible thing, is just to be able to learn. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, is that a lot of my learning is observational learning, and a lot of my learning is through kind of serendipitous encounters with random people, and just learning about their challenges, about their journey, and then taking out little pearls from their wisdom, and then using that in your own life. And so that was an incredible experience of being able to interact with people from so many different nations, different cultures, different religions. That was really, really incredible.
What did I read now recently? I may be wrong with the number, but it's like something like maybe over 200 different nationalities that are based in the UAE.
Look, I wouldn't be surprised. It really is a melting pot. I mean, there's a strong local Emirati culture and a strong local Emirati flair that is definitely prevalent there, but there are also so many other cultures and so many other nationalities, and so I learned a lot from all of that.
But they are progressing. I mean, if you look at, I remember going 20 years ago, 21 years ago, and places where we were doing the desert safaris is now like downtown Dubai, right? What and this is the analogy that people use, that they say in that 20 years, look at South Africa and look at the decay in infrastructure. Are there certain aspects of that environment and that culture that makes for that progress?
I think there certainly are. I think, a strong investment in infrastructure. That's certainly one of them. And unfortunately, it goes back to the thing of own goals, is that we have underinvested in infrastructure in this country, or we have set aside money, but it wasn't used in the correct way for infrastructure investment. I mean, if you look back, and I'm not a political analyst and nor am I a financial analyst, but if you look back on Eskom and you look at all the financial injections that they've had over the last 10 years, so we don't see that money coming through in tangible infrastructure development. Whereas in that country, where, in the UAE, you see that tangible development in infrastructure. And that is so important, because that development in infrastructure, raises people, raises community, creates jobs, creates awareness, creates tourism. And that is something that we really need to look at in South Africa.
And another of the social aspect of it is, as a woman working in what many would be seen as an environment which traditionally hasn't maybe necessarily empowered women. How was that experience?
I didn't feel it there. Personally, I didn't feel it. And, a lot of people ask me this question in my careers, how is it to be a woman in finance, and how is it to be a woman in business? I don't look at it like that. And maybe it's because of my starting point. I started off at JP Morgan, where I had a lot of female mentors. So having a female mentor wasn't new to me. It was the norm. It wasn't the exception, and when I went to the UAE, I didn't look at it as, oh, I'm female, I'm going to be sidelined. I just carried on and I did what I had to do. And I also realized that the women there had a similar attitude. A lot of them were highly educated. They wanted to work. They wanted to give back to their communities. They wanted to give back to society. They also wanted to have families and children, etc. And why not? We can have it all.
Again, I mean, this is a lot, because you're very inspiring, and I mean, we haven't had a lot of females on the show, and I get that criticism as well, because people are like, are you just consciously doing this? And I'm like, not at all. The idea is we want more of anybody that's making an impact and influencing, because it resonates with somebody. Somebody out there listening can listen to your story and say, wow, if all of this can be achieved, coming from the humble beginnings of Fordsburg, with all of that, you can, the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, and it's not that it was an easy journey or it was an easy path, and it's not that I flew through everything in life. I started, when I did my studies, I started off studying pharmacy. And I absolutely hated it.
So we all make those mistakes.
So we all make those mistakes. Yeah. And I think sometimes failure is a path to success. It's understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what you like and what you don't like, and then just the ability to own it and move forward and move past that. We all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. We all have setbacks in life. It's about how we move beyond those setbacks. And I think, again, I'll go back to the point about the balance of kind of having that right mindset and that right work ethic, and how, marrying the two together.
Yeah, I think that's actually very, very important. I mean, if there's one thing, maybe the older generation had a lot of the hard work aspect. Maybe in many ways we're not as empowered from a mindset perspective, with limited opportunities. Whereas now, with the advent of technology and so much more people sharing the psychology of life, the mindset aspect, you now can think abundantly. You think you can create, you can be anything, right? Again, without going to the other extreme where it's just about that. You think of what comes to mind is like the movie The Secret, and books around that, if those have watched it. It's a lot of just dreaming it and it be. You think of the car, it'll be, the mindset is very, very, very important. You got to see it's an Islamic principle that we will never lose hope, no matter what our circumstances. But it has to be coupled. You cannot just achieve it. And I think this is the mistake that's been made, and maybe the wrong message that's coming to, and I myself experienced it. So very interesting, and again, topics for another. I think you kind of developing yourself into maybe becoming a host of some shows here on Hilaal TV. We can talk a lot about the mindset around money as well. You spoke about just financial management. We've got a few minutes left. I think around 2 minutes. Some messages where you can address, our viewers. Somebody watching. There are a lot of people challenged. What the show is about is to inspire people. To take them out of whatever they're going through. Some messages, some key lessons that you can leave. Shows like this stay on forever. When we leave the planet, maybe somebody at a later stage, maybe the next generation, one day on YouTube will listen to Khadija Dangor and say, what she said to me has changed my trajectory.
Yusuf, thank you. There's one thing that really sticks with me, and it has been with me for many years, and it is actually not my own, and I will not claim it to be my own. But it's a quote by Nelson Mandela, where he says, education is the most powerful tool, and it is through education that the daughter of a farmer can become the leader of a great nation. And I think that is so important, because that talks to mindset, having a growth mindset, but it also talks to the work ethic. And for me, the message that I would like to leave behind for the viewers is having this balance between a fantastic mindset, a growth mindset, a mindset to believe, to think, to grow, and then balancing it with the tenacity, the strength, and the courage to put in the hours, to put in the hard work. And once you bring the two together, you will be a formidable combination.
And yes, the formidable combination epitomized. And I think the one thing that comes out strongly, you would agree with me, is that growth mindset, this journey, we take it right to our last breath.
Absolutely.
It's at that, you never have arrived. It's every day you challenged, and that's the beauty of this life. And as long as the challenges I heard from one very famous personal development guru, Tony Robbins, he said, as long as the challenge is different tomorrow, you will always be challenged in business, in life. But if you're stuck in the same challenge, then you're not growing. But tomorrow is going to be a greater challenge, and it's how you navigate it. And eventually you have the muscle memory to be able to deal with it and make it much easier. It is challenging for everybody. We've come out of this COVID, we're still wiping our eyes. I think we forget so easily.
We do.
And, there could be something else that comes up, and that's just the way we live.
I think the most important thing, and probably my final message, is don't underestimate the power of dua. And that is so powerful in itself. And we are so blessed to be Muslims. We are so blessed to grow up in a community with good people, with good leaders. But don't underestimate the power of dua, the power of, asking your Almighty for guidance and forgiveness. And that in itself will also take you very far.
On that high note, the power of dua, your connection with your Creator. We thank Khadija Dangor for her time.
Thank you.
And we hope you have been impacted as much as I have. Hope to see you on many other shows. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.